Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 73rd episode of the Dream Team Tonic podcast. With me, as usual, is James. Are you there, James?
I'm here, Tony.
And Ben, are you there?
I'm here, mate.
Happy days. And special guest for our second episode of the season. We've got ninth place finisher from last season, Matt Woolley. Are you there, mate?
Hi, Tony. I'm here.
Good to have you on board, mate. Obviously, part of the Patreon. It's nice to get you involved, and I know there's a hell of a lot of questions been put forward to you. So you're a popular guy. We'll fire straight into him, Matt.
Thanks. It's clearly a privilege to be on.
Hey, you flatterers, you flatterers. So just a few generic ones, just to get a feel on where you are with your fantasy football career and how you came. Obviously, a ninth place finish last season in Dream Team is absolutely huge. Like you basically one bad transfer away from winning it. How long you been playing fantasy football, mate?
So my FPL history goes back to 2012-13, when I finished 2 millionth and change. So not great. The last 6 years in FPL, though, I've had 4 top 100Ks. And the best was 13,000 a couple of years back. I do remember playing the Telegraph and Times when I was back in school. When it was fill it out on a slip on the newspaper or phone an expensive phone number.
Yeah.
To get your parents' permission for, which obviously I didn't. So, yeah, I do remember that. But more recently, in terms of taking it a bit more seriously, it's been the last few years. Been playing Sky for about 5 years, with taking advice at that point from the likes of Fergie, Dan Cox, Paul McNulty, and Ian Parrin. But that's then led on last season to me having a bit of a crack at Dream Team and the Telegraph. So not only was I delighted to finish 9th in Dream Team, also managed to end up in the top 20 in Telegraph as well. So I was really, really ecstatic with that.
Huge.
Might well be the best year I ever have, but it was great.
Not bad that. Go on, Ben.
We know you've had some high ranks in your time. What is the closest you've come to winning?
So
I think we've just covered that, haven't we?
it was. And you mentioned about one good, one bad transfer away. I still haven't gone back. So there was. I discussed it in a Discord a couple of weeks before the end of the season last year. There was a moment when Maddison had a 3-for-1 over Liverpool, and I was tempted, and I haven't added his points onto my score to see if he would have actually, how far he would have pulled me up. I know it would have been into at least the top 5. It was close. Definitely by far and away the closest I've come to winning any of them. The Telegraph.
He were on fire at that point, wasn't he, Madison?
He was.
It was one of them where if you weren't on him, it was, when's it going to end? Like, am I going to jump on him now because he's a very streaky player, as we've always discussed on here. But yeah, he fired, didn't he? He fired, and he was probably a good lift up for quite a few teams.
He was, and to be fair, he was lots of decisions went my way through the season. So obviously you make decisions, and they're going to go for you or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Make a bad decision, and so many of them went for me. So many of them through the whole, like particularly December, January, February, March. Just everything I seemed to be moving to was the right move. Whether it was Mahrez or earlier in the season, Andros Townsend, just at the right moment got on them. And Maddison was the one I considered, and was perhaps the classic mistake, saving them for the Liverpool transfers into the Champions League final. But that could have been the right decision as well in a different scenario.
Yeah, that's it. You never know. Hindsight's beautiful, isn't it?
It is.
If we all had hindsight, we'd all win it. You don't have that, do you? Yeah, good.
How would you describe your approach to playing Dream Team? Any key tips for a successful season?
So I think Part of that is the word patience. So I'm not going to be somebody who's moving and jumping around all the time. Very much in the mould, I think Fergie said last season, of trying to plan almost for the following month using that month's transfers in Dream Team. So definitely being patient, definitely being a bit of an autonomatron, if I've just pronounced that correctly. Being a bit robotic in just going through the first part of the season with 10 teams and making the right transfers, not doing anything too silly, but religiously doing that on a Thursday night, which for me worked, the Thursday night approach. I realise for many people that might be Friday morning, but either way, to actually just make sure you do in Dream Team, I think that's crucial. Not missing those weeks where there might be big moves coming up,
Yep.
but also not jumping into decisions either, just thinking through it and making that decision or not. It was perversely different in Telegraph, where I forgot about my team virtually for the first half of the season.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, it was for the best. Well, but I don't think that's right in the Dream Team. And last season, and we might come on to, what might be the approach this season, but certainly last season, I think trying to do that strategy of having the transfers left in hand at the end of the season, having them available if you've got injuries or all of a sudden a really important player emerged, rather than doing the luxury transfer at the start of the season and thinking, Mane's going to score more than Jota over the next few weeks. Just being patient was, I think, one of the keys for me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I would say is actually reading the rules and knowing what the rules are was
number
crucial.
one. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, all the games are different, aren't they? And they've all got their own little quirks. It's so important to get those little nuances out of each individual game. Totally agree with that.
It is true. If you get anybody that's rolling over and listening to this probably first time, or from Sky or from Telegraph, FPL, whatever it might be, is you have the players that perform in certain games, and you have to know them players or know how they're going to score in this game. It's so important. So important when you switch from one game to the other, because one person in one game, or one player in one game, could be such an absolute a beast, but in another game is useless. It's always worth noting.
Yeah, and that's not, like in this version of the game, hitting Mahrez at the right time of year last season was so important. It was a real boost.
Mahrez always ends up as the one who jumped off him or on him at the right time. He's an absolute nuisance. Dream Team nuisance, Mahrez. I'm hoping, obviously, after the new contract signing and Sterling leaving and obviously Jesus leaving, maybe Mahrez is more nailed, and maybe we're going to see more of a. I think I wouldn't put it past Mahrez if he gets the game time that he'll top that midfield scoring charts. For me, I think at 5.5 million, I think it's a good shout.
He might be an option this season, not just in Dream Team, but across all formats.
Exactly. I think he touched off. I know in FPL he's probably 8 million. Telegraph, obviously, but if he's playing, he's definitely more of an option. I think he always done it in Dream Team because he just used to come on the score. He'd come on the score and then he'd spend the next game on the bench, and so it's frustrating Mahrez, but yeah.
I suppose the one thing that will be different this season for Mahrez is potentially not having the penalties when Haaland's on the pitch, which could be
big discussion.
Back of the mind.
Haaland's got to take penalties, hasn't he?
You'd have to assume so. He's not going to want to be handing them to anyone else.
Yeah.
He's not short on confidence, is he, Haaland?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Let's see. Right, Matt, we put the questions to the community. We put them to the patrons as well, and we got flooded, absolutely flooded, mate. I don't think we've been this flooded since Fergie won it. So take that as a compliment.
Thank you.
We're going to fire a lot your way. We're obviously going to follow on with answers ourselves, but yeah, a lot of people want to hear from you. So first up from Patron, Patrick, which of the cheaper players enablers do you feel has the most potential to rocket up in price this season?
So I think the first answer I'd say to that is I'm not sure we know the answer to that yet. 3 weeks to go. And if we all remember last year, the answer to that was Simicast. And that was due to an injury to Robertson.
Yeah.
So, obviously never hope anyone gets injured, but there could well be an enabler that we don't yet know who he is, who comes into the fray.
Yeah, it's a good shout.
But I do think that there are a couple who I've got my eye on. And funny that was Patrick's question, because I think he's identified one as well, who is a good potential to look at. So I think Solanke. Now, striker spots could be at a bit of a premium this year.
Yeah.
I think we all ended last season thinking big at the back, maybe not 3 up front. And then all of a sudden we're drifting towards 3 big hitters up front. But I think Solanke, if he does play regularly up front for them at 3 million, isn't a bad option. I think the 2 million, 2.5 million midfielders, though, might be where the real value is. So potentially Boris Johnson at 2.5 million for Forest. So if last year, I think he had 18 goals and 10 assists. So if he can even translate some of that 2.5 million into the Premier League, then I think we could be onto a bit of a bargain there. So he's definitely in my
quite often, though. I was just going to say, quite often, one of those promoted teams does surprise you, doesn't it? I mean, look at Sheffield United a couple of years ago. They just kept on going, didn't they? Everyone was thinking, oh, it will stop soon. But I think they were pretty good until at least the early part of the following year, and it probably dropped away a bit.
Yeah, they've got the momentum, haven't they?
It's just
that's the thing.
When we look for enablers and stuff, it's at that price bracket. If he's a million, let's have a do. But not at this price bracket. When Matt, carry on. Sorry, I've interrupted you here, but carry on with a few at 2.5, 3 million.
No, I think it's fair enough. Johnson could be an absolute flop in the Premier League. We could see that. I think the other, and equally, you've got Mitrovic at Fulham, who I think he's probably overpriced. To be honest, I don't think he gets into my lineup. I don't think. I've got a draft at the moment which doesn't have any of these players in. To be fair, that I'm mentioning, but one player that does stand out a little bit could be Mbeumo, who is at 2 million, and that's actually, as I say, Patrick asked the question, but he's also come up with a potential option there in Mbeumo. If he's playing regularly as he did last season, then that could be somewhere to go.
Talk about Mitrovic. Now, is he the only player that can score nigh on 40 goals in the Championship? But then when he comes to Premiership, he can't muster up 10.
He'll end up being on the bench after about 4 weeks.
I don't get it.
No.
He's such a goal scorer in the Championship. He's an absolute animal. But you put him up to Premier League. So is this, if you put Mitrovic in, say, I don't know, a Spurs side, is he a goal scorer?
History's littered with players like that, isn't it? Like your Dwight Gales, comes up with Newcastle, scores 2 goals all season, drops back down, scores 20, 25 goals. Some players just can't make that move that up, take that step up in class, can they? I think that's the answer.
Yeah. Time will tell.
Yeah.
Yes, it will. And I think time will tell in, again, some of these pre-season friendlies that we get over the next few weeks. I'm just looking through some of the £1 million and £1.5 million players. You could make credible stories to say at Brighton, Adam Lallana will get minutes. You could say that Struijk at Leeds could get minutes. You could make cases to say, Sonny March or Click, sticking with Brighton and Leeds there, but whether they're really players you actually want anywhere near your team is another matter. Even if they do get minutes, I mean, I think it's pretty slim pickings at 1.5 million. To be fair,
Where was
They're definitely. Sorry,
Come on, Ben.
I just want to say they've made it so hard this year that you're going to have to need 3 or 4 enablers in your team.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's great that we're having discussions
Yeah.
about these players.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'd be quite dismissive of a few players, but it's good that, and we've discussed it through last season as well. How can you make it harder? One way we said was, let's just price the premiums out of this world. If you price them so high, we can't have every one of them. And then all of a sudden, we don't need just one enabler. We're after 4 enablers. So we're looking at 4 around the 3 million bracket to be able to fit everybody in. But then with people like what we're trying to say about Brendan Johnson, who's a very, very good player. He's a very talented, not Forest player. Sorry, what was he priced at, boy?
he was at 2.5.
So you got 2.5 for Johnson at Notts Forest.
Out of position as well.
You've got Martinelli at 2.5 million.
Yeah, but he's a forward, and I think he's gonna take one of your premium strikers up. If you know what I mean.
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. But I mean, who's going to score more? Who's going to make that money? Like, if you were only going to go for, I don't know, Haaland and Salah or Haaland and Kane, and you're going to fill the other one full of somebody, Martinelli at 2.5 million, or Nketiah even at 2.5 million. They're the ones, aren't they? And you're not going to go and take the gamble and just fill your midfield space with your Brendan Johnson from Forest at 2.5 million. I just think they've overpriced him. I think
this is brilliant. I think just we've all got different ideas this year. There's no more. There's gonna be no templates. Hopefully,
no. I know.
No, I look back on my team that ended up in the top 10 last season, and I mean, genuinely on game week 1, the weakest link. So you think about the questionable players. There was Simicas, who even by the stage we got to the start of the season, we knew was playing the first 3 matches probably.
Yeah,
he was really good. And well, there's another player who's currently on bail, who I won't mention, but there's I just decide that we didn't need to make those compromises. So it's absolutely fantastic that we, as you say, we're having to make those compromises this year.
Definitely. It's gonna be such a good season. I can see it.
I noticed you started with 5 Liverpool players, 5 City players, and 1 Man United striker who we won't mention. You just can't do that this year, can you?
No way at all in this world of doing it. And I ended up into kind of Ben Rama and Townsend fairly quickly for some of the non-playing, because I had Grealish and Ferran Torres in from the start, who weren't cheap, but they weren't also playing regularly. So it was quite easy to get into that sort of really heavy hitting side last season.
Yeah.
And it's gonna, we'll probably touch on it with some other questions later, but some of the actually trying to get your squad the value you need this season is going to be even more important, I think, than it has been in the past.
Yeah. And definitely touching on that, like you said, the importance of the squad value. We'll move on. And Gaz's right arm has been on the patron. Who are the must-have 5 or 6 premium players? Matt Woolley first, please.
I saw that was in. I think that was in kind of bold capitals. Matt Woolley first.
Yes. He's prompted basically. You've got to answer first. You...
I mean, I think to me, and I've tried to fit them into my draft. I think Salah and Haaland, for me, are the 2 who I really want to commit to. I mean, I'm scared of Kane. I don't, and I think, and I don't have the statistics to back this up really. Obviously, there's the myth that Kane doesn't really do very well in August, but I have a feeling that we might need to look at whether that's affected by whether there's been a World Cup or a Euros in in June, July. Obviously, he's had a good break this year, and hopefully he's he's rested up and fit because my Premier League side is actually third. I'm hoping he does all right. So, yeah, I do fear him a bit. I think that I'm not sure if I get to 6 here in the big hitters because I actually couldn't fit them in. But I think Salah, Haaland. I think Sterling is one who I'm starting to get interested in. Chelsea. I haven't fitted Mahrez in, as you spoke about. But if he's playing more regularly, then he's got to be a thought. I think Trent and Cancelo at the back. But again, I just can't fit all these players in. So if I were naming 6, it would probably be Salah, Haaland, one of Son or Kane. It would be Cancelo and Trent, who I'm going to put in the premium bracket here. And then probably Sterling for me. But it's so hard to
Sterling's
fit
a good shout. No, he's moved to Chelsea. He's a massive shout, isn't he?
I mean, I'm going to hark, but I might say this a few times tonight, and I already have. But we'll have to see how the teams all fit together. I mean, the kind of how Chelsea are going to set their front line up is going to be really interesting as we get towards the start of the season. But definitely. I think Sterling, I mean, this is his chance to shine now, and let's hope that he does do actually quite well.
Yeah, I mean, he's done all right at City, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at his City history, but he has probably got a chance to probably just nail a place at Chelsea. Like, let's nail that position, and because he's a talented player. But Kane and Salah, the last 1-2, top two scorers at the forward positions last season and the season before. I think there's guaranteed points. I think Kane come up for a lot of scrutiny last year, especially in Dream Team as well, and he still did the business. It's like if he had a full season without any of the issues, like he didn't play. How long didn't he play for at the start of the season?
He didn't play the first match, and then he come off the bench in the second game.
He's come off the bench in the second game, and then he worked quite with it for the first few.
And then he played the second leg of the qualifying Europa Conference game and scored a hat-trick. And then he did nothing again.
Helps.
He did nothing again after that for a while.
Yeah, and it just felt like he wanted to be at Man City at that time.
We were watching it going, he's at Man City. We were waiting for him to transfer to Man City. Now they've got Haaland. Kane's obviously fully dedicated now to Spurs. I can see him exploding this season. I can't leave Kane out. I really like penalties. I know he's so good at assisting Son, and so Son obviously got the golden boot last year with Salah, but then finishes I think he's about 60 points behind Kane in Dream Team points. So sometimes it's not about how many you score, but
Starman Awards.
He's a darling. He's an absolute darling.
10 Starmans last year.
Yeah, there we go.
So are we? I mean, I'll put a question out here myself here. Are we thinking that we're actually going to have to jump around more between the premium assets than in the past? Because
possibly,
if we look at, if you think about the Champions League, there are going to be some easy games for Salah, for Haaland, for Kane. They're all going to have those home matches, which the managers will still prioritise because it's Champions League, but there'll be, potentially goals galore.
And therein lies when we talk about big at the front, big at the back, whatever it might be. So if you start the game with Salah, Haaland, Kane, and like you say, there's some easy games coming around for them lads, you're already on them. If you say you take a punt on Son, and then this easy game comes around and you're thinking, I need Salah, within them first 2 weeks, Salah could have gone up by 0.6. Son might have not scored, you're down 0.6, and all of a sudden, there's absolutely no chance, and you're stuck. This season, he's going to be... It's so dangerous. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be... And I think my advice to everybody is probably you need these big hitters in your team before they hit. Because if they hit and you're not on them, you're done for.
Hey, it's not Pokemon. You can't catch them all.
But obviously with the defenders, so we look at the back four. Obviously you've got Trent, you've got Robert, Cancelo, James, Chilwell. I mean, such good players that are involved in goal.
I can see transfers here in the first week on the Thursday night, to be honest. Friday morning.
While we're talking about premium players, should we have a look at Matt Woolley's draft he's got so far?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah.
Go on, Matt. Talk us through that, mate.
So I've got. I mean, I don't really know at this moment how good this is or not. And I suppose before I talk about this draft, I should say that one of the things about last season was I had 10 quite different teams. So I had 10 different teams going to the start of the season. My play in Dream Team last season wasn't particularly based on having any teams in any particular cash league, so that none of them, to me, they were all as important as each other.
Yep.
So started off with a load of different variations on teams, and fairly rapidly after about 6 weeks, a couple of them were still sort of doing well, and the others were not so well. So I think the first thing is do different things with different teams if you're in that luxury position. So I've got Sanchez in goal. He's a bit of a placeholder at the moment. I need to have a think about it, but I'm happy enough with him. Obviously, Brighton won't have European games, so that's a bit of a sacrifice there.
Yeah.
In defence, I'm assuming Romero plays the majority of games at the moment, so he's in decent value. I've not got a problem there. Chalobah, assuming he plays again, decent value, good defence with Chelsea, so pretty happy with him. Chilwell, if he comes back and is half the player he was a couple of, at the beginning of last season and the season before then, got no problem with that.
Do you see that as a gamble, Matty? With 5 million on Chilwell, obviously we've not seen him since. Don't get me wrong. If he comes, like you say, if he comes back half the player he was, like we're happy days. But
yeah, I mean, I think he probably is a bit of a gamble, and there are a couple of there's probably him and another gamble in this team who I'm really not sure about at this point in time. I mean, Chilwell could become could become Reece James if that looked more of an option in pre-season. I've obviously sacrificed not having Trent or Cancelo in this draft, despite them being they're definitely two of my top 6 kind of players. So that's the jeopardy in the game this season.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it's decisions like that, like Chilwell being in your side from the off and taking that gamble, that can propel you into the top 100, and all of a sudden then you build from there. So I was just saying, like, obviously you can worry about the 5 million on Chilwell, but that might actually become very shrewd money, and Chilwell hit the ground running, and nobody has him.
Yeah, totally. And I do think that going back to my approach of patience, there may be a little switch towards, because of the World Cup, and where that sits and how that's affected the balance of the transfers through the season. There may be a little bit more value in being a bit bolder and a bit more quick to make those transfers. So if Chilwell isn't doing the business after 1 week, even 2 weeks, then move on. I think so. Is an option.
He saves you $500,000, doesn't he, on Reece James as well?
He does.
I like it. I like the option. Just questioning it. I've got to do it. Yeah, like playing devil's advocate, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. But yeah, go on, Matty.
It is. So then in midfield, I've got Kulusevski, who, if he plays the majority of matches, which I think he probably will, given how well he finished the season, I think he's going to be still getting points. Obviously, he's got Richarlison to battle with a bit, but I think Richarlison might fill in for, he could fill in for Kane in some matches, to be honest, to give Kane a bit of a rest. So I think Kulusevski's priced about right at 3.5. So I think he's pretty good. I was just going back to the comment on Reece James and Chilwell, actually, and I don't have any spare budget from this team. So this is a £50 million team, actually. So I couldn't go to James necessarily even if I wanted to from there. So this is bang on the money. Diaz in midfield, I think he's, how good was he at the end of last season, to be honest? I didn't think he would displace the front three for Liverpool. I mean, Jota, Mane and Salah. Jota having displaced. Obviously, Firmino looked unbelievable. And now, they've been able to go and, the changes they've made up front there at Liverpool, scary stuff, to be honest. And I think Diaz is amazing.
We obviously banged on about Diaz on the pod, and at the very first, probably the first 3-4 weeks, he weren't getting any returns. Like, for all his hard work, he weren't getting no star mans, no assists, no goals. And he started towards the end of the season, to rack a few in, and he's a quality player. At 5 million, and I think with Mane going, I think he's more solid. So I think he's more nailed. What does obviously put me off, and it puts me off a lot of City players as well, is this 5 substitute rule. It's gonna be basically, if Salah scores a hat trick and you're 3-0, Diaz, Salah, and whoever else is coming off the pitch. They're coming off to be rested.
No, it's a good shout. But yeah, 5 million. I don't think it's a bad price for Diaz.
No,
assuming
price.
He plays 70% of their minutes across the English stuff and the European stuff. I mean, I think that's good value. Sterling, equally 5 million. I mean, I think he's potentially a sensational out of position striker this season.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that. There is a debate to be had about Havertz and how he fits in around where Sterling plays, but I think Sterling's going to be, if he gets the minutes at Chelsea, he's going to be sensational. Yeah. Sancho, I mean,
I like that, man. I like that.
Yeah, can Ten Hag get the best out of him? I mean, it's clearly got amazing quality. Sancho, and £3 million, he could be an absolute bargain, or he could be, if United look as bad as they did last season, the player that I'm transferring out after a week or two.
I'll openly say I was one of them that was basically Sancho. What a signing! I was openly saying this is massive. What a great player, great in the Bundesliga. So dangerous, so attacking, so this. He's great for Dream Team. I'll openly say that is how I was feeling. That never ever come to fruition. But 3 million this year.
And I think that in that midfield, I've tried to end up with some, extending my strikers essentially to more than 3 strikers. So carrying on with strikers, Salah and Haaland, we've already touched on. I think they're in my team to start with. I realise Spurs have got Southampton at home in the first match, and that's taking a bit of a risk without Kane. But I think the upside on Haaland could be huge. And I think Gabriel Jesus, he's 5 million. If he's playing up top for Arsenal and he's not sharing minutes with Nketiah and Martinelli, who we talked about earlier, I think he could be Arsenal. I think Arsenal have gone forwards, which pains me to say as more of a Spurs.
Are you a Spurs fan, mate?
Well, so I'm an Argyle fan, but in terms of my first, so I'm from Cornwall, and miles away from any football teams in the old when I was growing up. So
the Premier League.
Yeah, miles away from the Premier League. So the first thing that got me into football really was kind of the Football Italia era when it was on free on Channel 4, and a bit of FA Cup, and the kind of Gascoigne Lineker era was where I sort of picked up on Spurs really.
Spurs. Yeah.
And then I discovered that actually Plymouth wasn't too far away as a corner. You could get to Cornwall and you could actually go and watch the football. So yeah, I'd say I'm I'm an Argyle fan. Classic. You shouldn't really have two teams, but it happens.
That's it.
But Gabriel Jesus, I think he's got value this season, and if he is, as I say, playing and not sharing too many minutes with Nketiah and Martinelli, then I think he's the value option across all formats at the moment. So
I remember with Jesus years and years ago, like when he first turned up at City, his very first season, and I got so excited about him. I like saying, this lad, he will score goals for fun. He's got everything about him. He's strong. He wins aerial duels. He don't give a shit. He gets stuck in. He got everything, skill. And then it just kind of like, he did well at the start, but then he just drifted off. And obviously last season he's done well when he played, but again he's just never ever like used consistently. He's a top player, top player.
And they're in. Am I right in saying Arsenal are in the Europa League this year? Yeah. Thursday nights on obviously beaches, but So I mean, they again. I don't know how the rotation will work there, but that could be some goals coming there as well.
Yeah, and that's why I like that choice. But then he's in your forward positions, and then I struggle with leaving a Salah, a Haaland, a Kane now.
And I'm feeling in a bit of a luxury. I mean, I am entering some cash leagues this season, and therefore I do have different teams that are more important to me now all of a sudden. So I am thinking a bit more. But equally, I'm thinking that I want to have those decisions spread across the different teams. So I'm going to have a team with Kane, Salah, and Haaland up front. I'm going to have a team with, big at the back with potentially Reece James or Chilwell, plus Trent and Cancelo, and another big hitter at the back. So I'm going to have several different variants this year. I don't think I'll do what I had last year, which was had a Villa team, which had most of the Villa in it. But...
Excellent. Right, moving on then. Question for Matt from Andy Barnett on the patron. There must have been a month in the season where you must have taken a fairly big risk that paid off. For example, maybe either by going all of Liverpool defence, standing firm with a split City or pool defence, or holding your assets. When was your key month, and what do you do or refrain from doing?
So I think in general, my approach last season, I do, although I think subtly it will change this season to being a bit bolder, is generally the strategy of holding the transfers back as the month goes on will still be my play this season. Last season's months where I think I did particularly well, September last year, I ended up moving from Ferran Torres onto Andros Townsend, and I held him for 8 weeks. And it was the week that he came in when Dominic Calvert-Lewin was injured. And it was clear that Andros Townsend was going to play up front. And I think Everton had a League One or League Two club. I'm not going to offend by particularly naming who it was in the Carabao Cup. I can't remember. But it seemed very logical that he'd be playing the Premier League match on a Saturday and the Carabao Cup to get some minutes in his legs in midweek, and he could go, and score big in that. So I think his value just rocketed over those weeks, actually.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
Andros Townsend.
What a footnote to a season Andros Townsend is. Certainly
God, honestly.
But he was a huge riser for me in September. And I think it was around that time I'd also just bought in Ben Rama, who I didn't have in at the start, despite Antonio saying that he was going to be the mustard and he loved working with Ben Rama. And I also, so I clearly splurged a few transfers because I bought in Armand Traore as well.
The cheat code. The cheat code.
Got rid of him after 2 weeks.
And who did you bring in, Matt?
Sorry?
Who did you bring in for... who did you replace Traore with?
Oh my God! I can see who it is. I've got a copy of from FF stuff my team throughout the season. So I hadn't looked at that until now. Riyad Mahrez, I took out for him.
I was looking through your transfers, and most of them look like amazing moves. But yeah, the Traore to Sarr, and then back out again. Was one area I picked up on. So it's clearly obvious that not every, even if you're a fantastic player, not every move is going to pay off, is it? So, but
no,
you just need more to pay off than not, I guess.
And I think more did pay off than not last season. But as I say, I look at even the starting team, and I think, at this time of the year, we're all kind of worried about getting all 11 positions right. But as I say, I had Ferran Torres, Jack Grealish, the Manchester United forward, and those three who really did nothing through the year. Who I suppose Jack Grealish did contribute to Man City, but not as a dream team asset. So, to be fair, you're not going to get it right. If you can get 7 or 8 right at the start, then you're doing well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the other month then, I was really restrained, and I was really planning for the Chelsea exodus of the Club World Cup. So I held back transfers and used my December transfers really to get rid of Chelsea players rather than January, which some others would have done. And I was sweating when the mighty Greens of Argyle played Chelsea and Lukaku.
Of course, yes, I remember
that. What a game that was, and how good Argyle were, and not too far away from getting a draw there and taking them back to Owen Park. Or probably wouldn't have been a replay, actually, would it? It would have been settled on the day on penalty. Yes, it was close to a penalty shootout because it was after extra time. But that day I was sweating, and getting out James, Rudiger and Mount in a planned way with December transfers, then leaving me free for January to have during a busy January for everyone other than Chelsea, was really important, I thought. So again, it was the decisions paying off. More of them paid off than not. That Chelsea one could have gone absolutely catastrophically wrong with star men in that Chelsea team and hat tricks all over the pitch.
Yeah, definitely.
So those are the 2 months that I would stand out to me.
Happy days. Right, Wade's been on. Now you've had time to play around with some drafts and the prices. Have you decided on a balanced side or big premiums in either defence, mid or strike? Another side question. Aren't you scared about the start? I am. I mean, I feel I need the best players now as they maybe even harder to get to if they start well. And my picks don't pull up any trees. Yet it's so hard to know who to have, as having them is always impossible. Yeah, Matt. It's basically saying, have you decided on whether you're going to balance it across your team, or are you going to go heavy at the top, heavy at the back?
So I think having spent, as I say, the end of last year thinking it's going to be big at the back, I'm now in a big at the top mode. Getting in the premiums, getting in at least 2 of Salah, Haaland and Kane. Someone who's a bit affordable like Jesus, Sterling, Diaz. I mean, I know that we're all thinking you can't get too many big players in, but just reading those 5 off and still...
Yeah.
You still have an ability to get the premiums in Dream Team. So I would be focusing on premiums. I mean, knowingly I'm going without Trent and Cancelo. That's my compromise at the moment. I think that to balance it out, I think the big problem we've got is fixtures, and the good side seem to have really good fixtures at the start of the season. And it's, there could be some really high scores across August and into September for some of the Liverpool assets, the Man City assets, Chelsea assets, and you don't really want to stray too far into some of the sides who are A, not that good, and B, don't have the fixtures, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I think it's, I might get as many of the premiums as you can, but try and keep playing assets from the teams who are decent teams.
Yeah, definitely. Great advice, that. Great advice. Right, from Cezos, premium defence worth having, Liverpool City mini blocks.
So I think I will have a few teams with the defensive blocks in. It's not necessarily the team that I'm thinking as my number one team at the moment. I'm entering into some of the cash leagues, to be fair.
Yeah,
But that's irrelevant because equally last season, my team that ended up really high was not one of the top 5 teams that I entered into certain for fun leagues. So, it's a bit of horses for courses. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
As I say, the kind of defensive blocks, Liverpool have got, what looks like a very easy August. United away, they do have to face in August. So that, if you go back, City, fairly easy August as well, to be honest. So I am gonna again try and focus on sides that, at least one or two sides that have as many Liverpool and City players, potentially with a couple of bargains in there to enable that as I can. So I think that I was playing around with a side that ended up with, I think, 8 Liverpool players, no Mo Salah, but covered a lot of the other Liverpool players, which I thought looked, that had potential to be something that by the end of August could absolutely be laughing if they do really well. So I think there are some options, and I mean, last season the Liverpool defensive block was what propelled me into a good place with Cancelo as well. So I think that it's hard to ignore that. Yet you can't have everything.
Yeah, not this season.
No,
not this season.
So I think that it's a big August this year. We've got 5 sets of Premier League fixtures. We've got the Carabao Cup for the teams who aren't in Europe, and we've got West Ham in the Papa John's playoff. So it's going to be...
That's my line.
Can't help listening to the previous 72 of these and picking up some of the lingo. So yes. So it's big August, and I'm not sure if I'd be thinking you need to make one transfer every Thursday. I've already alluded to the fact that it might be the season where you might want to fairly quickly move off somebody after week 1 or week 2 onto a different enabler who's turning into the bandwagon, who might sustain the whole season. But I do think you need to be more flexible than thinking about one transfer every Thursday. I think you need to be more flexible than thinking about 5 transfers at the start of the month and splurging them, certainly. If anyone's thinking of doing that, I think you need to be aware of injuries. You do not want to be in a scenario where you're 3 weeks into August and you've got an injured player who you can't get out of your side.
Yeah.
And the bandwagons could emerge quite early on. We might see we've talked about potentially the risk of someone like Brennan Johnson, and he might not perform, but he might. And if at 2.5 million, or Mbuemo at 2 million, they go off on one, and you're not on them, and you've got someone else who's pretty darn average at 3 million or 2.5, you're going to want to jump on them. So I don't see any problem with one a Thursday for the whole of August. I wouldn't bookmark them in. I'd hope not to use them as early if I can avoid it. You've then got as we talk about West Ham having those extra matches in the playoff of the Europa Conference League. They have had players who've delivered consistently over the last few years. First of all, Lingard, attacking midfielder, when he came on loan from Manchester United. Then Ben Rama at the start of last season, and then Bowen. So we don't know who this year's Lingard, Ben Rama, or Bowen might be. Probably Bowen. But it could be anyone. And I think using some transfers in August to get onto those sorts of players, or if a Conor Gallagher is starting to emerge somewhere at one of the promoted clubs, or at Southampton, who look like an absolute they've done absolutely nothing as far as I can see in terms of bringing anyone in. They look like they're going backwards, but who knows? There might be someone who's coming through their structure of their youth who comes in and actually is good. So just I try and be conscious of those things. I try and listen to football, watch football. I mean, for me, last season and the last couple of years, I've listened to probably more football, watched more football than I've watched in the last decade. For me, there's been a lot more of the ear test than the eye test, actually. So we talk a lot about the eye test and watching it on Match of the Day or watching it on Sky or BT or Amazon. But actually, for me, listening to some of the commentators on Radio 5 and even on Talk Sport between their constant bombardment of gambling adverts, you do pick up a lot of kind of nuance as to players that are on the ball, players that are exciting, that are getting on the into the penalty area, who the commentators starting to raise their voice because they think might do something.
Andrew Townsend,
exactly.
Yeah,
Lingard was one from a few years ago, and I think it goes right the way back to, and literally the reason I was listening to more football was due to probably the first lockdowns, working from home. The radio, you could either listen to, music that was the same. I'm not a huge listener to music. I was always more of a Five Live kind of news and sport kind of listener. But you could listen to live football when restart happened, or you could listen to endless talk about restrictions, COVID, and get quite depressed, to be honest. So rather listen to the football or listen to brilliant podcasts like the Dream Team Tonic. And walking around on the kind of daily allowed outside for a walk with earphones in, listening to a Premier League football match when they were all played at different times between Brentford and Everton. You got to learn more about Brentford and Everton players than you would ever do normally. So I think listen to, watch, try and pick up on who are those players who are going to be on the radar next week of everyone, who you can get in that week before and get their price rise and get their get their points. If they're the new Lingard, Benrahma or Bowens or Gallagher's, fantastic.
Definitely. Completely agree with all that. Going on from that, obviously Man United players, they have been some of the big hitters in previous seasons, a dream team. Maguire has been a dream team darling. We've got Fernandes, who was absolutely racked up the points. Based on their terrible performances last season, which ones might be worth a punt? And that's from Rick.
So I think, Rick, the decent enough fixtures in August, it's not a bad shout. And I've got Sancho in my top draft. They've got Brentford away in the second match, Brighton and Hove Albion at home in the first match. Then they've got Liverpool at home, which is clearly going to be a bit of a tester in that third match. Southampton away and Leicester away. So it's not too bad. So I think it's not too out there to have a Liverpool player in the side to start with. They've obviously got Europe. Not the Europe they'd want, but they've got Europe. And I started with a United player who, again, won't mention it last season. So I think having one in, a bit of a risk. Eric Ten Hag could change them into something that's a bit more decent this season. The ones I'm looking at, so Sancho is currently in my number one team draft. We've talked about him. Fernandes, Bruno, probably back on penalties, I'd assume. He is 5.5 million though, so
he was an absolute beast years ago.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if he come back to his best?
I know. You could see him up there in the top, in the really high up in the charts, the points. Yeah, I just see it now.
Yeah.
Still waiting for the Eriksen price as well, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think Rashford at 3.5 million. If he ends up playing centre forward, I think that's the big question. So you've just mentioned it actually around Eriksen. Who's going to be playing up top? Is it going to be Eriksen or is it going to be Rashford? Or are they going to rotate? Are they going to do 50-50? I don't know. I just don't know who's going to be up front for United. And therefore, one of those two
Martial's getting a
might
bit
be
of
the
Vulcan
option.
as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martial's getting a bit of game time in pre-season. I think with United, we've got a bit of a guesswork here, and they've got 3, 4, 5 players that could explode. They could be big point earners in Dream Team. Maguire, we would touch on the defence. If they keep a few clean sheets, Maguire, he loves an header. He loves a Dream Team star man. So if they do start keeping clean sheets, Maguire will be back to his best. It's so difficult with a new manager coming in, but they've got a talented side.
I mean, I think Maguire could be a good shout, actually. As odd as that sounds, and I think you spoke about it on last week's pod, actually, as well.
Yeah.
But as odd as it sounds, despite how terrible he was last season,
Yeah.
they've just signed Martinez, who's left centre-back, for 57 million quid. So they've spent a bit of money. So he must have some talent. Varani's, a good quality player. So they've got talent there. I think Maguire will be in the side more often than not, still. And they've got Malacia in at fullback. So they are strengthening that defence. And they've still got David De Gea, who's really good. So, there is a potential that defence could turn this season. But we'll have to wait and see. I'd be waiting and seeing on that. I'm not sure I'd commit to a Manchester United defender from the start.
De Gea is only 3 million this year, I see. As is Ramsdale. I think if you're looking at sort of the mid-range keepers, I think those two could potentially be good buys, but it's a bit risky to start the season with them. But they could be gold, couldn't they? If they start getting some clean sheets.
What's the situation with Ronaldo? We haven't even mentioned him. He's gone AWOL.
I mean, I think we're guessing he's not going to be there. I think whatever chat I've heard of Premier League and whatever else, my guess is that Ronaldo isn't in the Premier League next season. Yeah, I think there's something going on. Don't get me wrong. If he starts for United, he's a danger. But I'd probably stick with more solid options.
Oh yeah, for that price as well.
Three.
I mean, I think ultimately Ronaldo wants Champions League records, and he wants to be the greatest European footballer, and he's not getting that at United.
He definitely will get out there.
It looks like Chelsea are out of the. It looks like it's not happening at Chelsea for him. So, but I don't know where the options are. Who's now
Bayern Munich?
No, they've come out and said we're not interested.
Yeah, they're more interested in Harry Kane in a couple of years' time. Yeah.
PSG not interested. Apparently, they've literally gone on record to say that. There's rumours he might go back to Madrid, but I doubt Benzema will want to be his water carrier again, will he?
No.
Could go back to Juventus, but who knows? I mean, obviously these some Saudi teams have come in for him, but he's not going to go there, is he? He won't lower himself to go to a league that's not. That's not up there. It's got to be one of the top leagues, doesn't it? So, but his options are limited.
I mean, it's got a horrible Gareth Bale type feeling about it, and I have to say, I'm surprised that Gareth Bale didn't go and join that breakaway golf tour.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking as well. That's so funny. That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Where is he going to end up? We don't know, do we? But I don't think it's going to be United this season. Any advice, Matt, for someone like Connor, who's going to be trying to manage in multiple formats and still perform at a high level in FPL, Sun Dream Team, and Sky?
So I've used the 3 words earlier, and I think you 3 all seem to agree with it. Read the rules. So be on top of the rules. Make sure you've worked out the nuances of the rules. And I think if you played it, any of the ones you played last year, read them again, because there's the World Cup in the way this year. And I think the impact of the World Cup across all formats is completely different. I don't know. I'm happy to go into some thoughts on the impacts it's got on Dream Team in a second if you want. But equally, in terms of the multiple formats, try to have reliable playing assets. So, for example, Kulusevski would have been one of those who was 3.5 million, who I'd say would be playing most of the time for Spurs. I think we need to watch that position. I think he will play the majority of games for Spurs, but try not to have those players who might get a game. Try to have the players who will get a game most of the time in all sides, because you don't. The last thing you want to be doing is having to transfer someone out just because they're not playing. On Dream Team, Thursday night, Friday morning, whichever your choice is as to when you do it, crucial. Telegraph and Sky, early on Saturday morning. Well, not early on Saturday morning particularly, but before the first match kicks off, get in there and make your moves. Be vaguely aware the whole week, but you can take different days of the week where you're not focusing on it and just taking a bit of a not
breather.
Exactly. I'd say take advice, but play to your strengths. So listen to this pod, pick up certain things from it, but everyone's different. For me, I am the kind of robotic or autonomatron that I said earlier, and probably still who just goes in and is patient, generally doesn't get carried away with myself. But if you're a player who takes punts on things and that's what you do, be the best one of those. And in some years that's going to win. So be the best of whatever your kind of strategy is. For me, I have loose plans. I don't particularly like to overplan too many weeks in advance. I'd have loose plans, but just be flexible. Talked about taking breaks. Limit the luxury transfers. So if you're weighing up in your mind at the start of a month when you've got 5 new, fresh, shiny transfers in, and you've got Mane, not Mark, that was last year's example, but if you've got I don't know, let's say you've got Sterling in at Chelsea and you think, well, actually, given everything, probably there's a £5 million player at Liverpool, Diaz, who might score more. That's a luxury kind of transfer that you don't need to make at the start of the month. You can save that. Watch football. Even if it's just reading some reports or whatever, just make sure you're still up to date on basic things like who's getting assists, who's playing where. You don't need to be over every little detail of the XA and the XG. That's not me personally, but for some that's hugely important. And I'd say specifically, we're talking about multiple formats, but on Telegraph, feel free to set and forget, because last season, the team that I had, the other team that was really good last season was on the Telegraph in the top 20, and pretty much I did nothing with it until Christmas. It was my first season doing it. I lucked in on a good side that had people who were playing regularly and decent. And then all of a sudden, having largely ignored it, realised it's doing all right, and I've got loads of transfers still left. So I think, it's that whole thing of knowing the rules and tailoring it a bit, but having that basic knowledge.
Yeah, good shout, Matt. Rick, he's going to put you on the spot here, Matteo.
Uh-oh.
You're going to say front three feels like it must consist of 3 of the following players: Haaland, Kane, Salah, Jesus, and Son. Who are you going for?
So currently, I think I'm on Salah, Haaland, and Gabriel Jesus. And I think the value in Arsenal's Jesus is there at 5 million. I think 2 of Salah, Haaland, and Kane are inevitable. I always remember back from FPL, I used to make, so when I took it a bit less seriously back in the day, I used to make silly transfers bringing in Spurs players because they were my size. I got burnt by it. I almost have a natural default not to have Spurs players in the team, just so that I'm not burnt by my own slight bias. So, as weird as that sounds, but I mean, Kane's got a fantastic Southampton at home, first up. What a game that is! So, I mean, that could be. Wasn't Southampton the game where Son and Kane scored 4 between them 18 months ago, and they assisted and scored each of them between them?
Yeah,
unbelievable. So that's a massive opportunity. I think there's even an argument if you think that I was sitting on, and it was comments I think on a podcast previously, and Nketiah was an option up front for 2.5 million.
So cheap.
Really cheap. But I just don't get the feeling he's going to play enough. So I think there's value in having a cheap third forward.
So it's dwindling away that Nketiah starts is dwindling away the more that I see Arsenal playing pre-season.
Yeah. I think he's going to be a Europa League striker and cup striker.
Yeah. But then I'm thinking he signed a long-term deal.
Yeah.
Like he signed that big contract as if he's going to be, right, I'm Arsenal's number 9. This is what I'm signing. And then you're thinking, right, okay. And then Jesus on the right, fair enough. Martinelli on the left. Is that the way it's going to work? But no, because Saka's on the right.
Yeah.
So, it's a tricky one. It's such a tricky one. Because I thought Nketiah, 2.5 million, absolute steal.
I think that's just this debate on multiple clubs now. Some of those clubs at the top of the league who've got money now have more talent than they know how to fit into their sides.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's very true.
It's, all kinds of arguments about how that's distorting the league, obviously, from a kind of football fan perspective. But in fantasy football world, it's going to be challenging.
Definitely.
If Arsenal have a good group in the Europa League, though, it might be worth having Nketiah anyway in there as an enabler. Because he could start them games and score hatfuls of goals.
Yeah.
It's a good shout.
It's true. It's true.
Well, we don't even know the draws yet. So once we get the draws, we'll be laughing. Then we can start planning a lot better.
Right. With the budget being tighter this year, which area of the team is better to place your enabler or cheaper players than Wesley Mellors? What do you reckon, Matt?
I mean, the easy answer there is I think it's what enabler can you find in those positions. So it's not necessarily is he a defender, is he an attacker, is he a midfielder? I think it's who can you actually find to fit those positions. So I'm really flexible at the moment as to where that enabler comes. If we see a defender who's going to play for City, Chelsea, or Liverpool, who's covering an injury for the first few matches, a la Tsimikas again. I mean, this answer is going to be quite similar to an earlier one, to be fair. I'd absolutely want that player in like gold dust before the start. If we know that before the start of the season, definitely. If Brendan Johnson looks like, I suppose we won't really know in pre-season, to be fair, how he's going to play in the Premier League. So more of a risk there, as with Solanke. But if we think Mbuemo's coming through and playing in all those matches again, as suggested by Patrick, I think what I'm saying is I'm not too worried what position the enabler's in, and the flexibility of formations, I think, is important here, and maintaining something where you could move your enabler onto a different enabler who looks like they're actually playing well in the first few weeks in 2 different positions. So not locking it in so that you have to make 2 transfers to get onto the enabler you want. I think that's what I'd be prioritising.
I tend to prefer. I've always tried to go for enablers in midfield. The problem with doing an enabler in defence is if you get it wrong, you could end up with minus points, week after week, and that player is going to plummet in value if they start shipping goals. I think
Don't tell me Ryan Bertrand.
Ryan Bertrand, yes. What a disaster that was. But that's a classic example of where it can go wrong if you don't get it right.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, in some ways, I think you're safer having that enabler in your midfield, and there's more options there as well. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. And those striker spots are so valuable that I think I would go midfield. I think, but like Matt said, you've got to be flexible. If if an amazing enabler like Simicast or something like that comes up again, why not jump on that? But just be a bit careful, I think.
Yeah, just to be open to whichever way it might fall. Go on, Ben.
Like I said before, we're going to need at least 4 enablers this season anyway. I think we only needed 1 last year, so
yeah,
it's going to be interesting. It's opened the game up a lot more, definitely.
So earlier I said I'm not particularly into XG and XA, and I'm not. I'm into looking back at the history of how players have performed and the actual points and price rises. So I did a bit of a look earlier to see what happened last year. And Trent finished the season at 7.9 million, 298 points. Cancelo finished the season with 7.1 million, with a price of 7.1 million and 275. So Trent was 0.8 more expensive at the end of the season, and he had 23 more points. So as they're both 6.5 this season, if I had to have one, I'd be having Trent. Very little question about it. I suppose the only counter argument to that is whether the rotation issues have changed slightly. Perhaps Zinchenko might be going to Arsenal. And if so, that makes João Cancelo a few more minutes, maybe. And Calvin Ramsey's in at Liverpool, so maybe he might take a minute or two off Trent. I can't really see that, so I'm still with Trent.
Yeah. I agree with that one. That. Yeah,
I think that's everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, coverage. So we'll just touch on Liverpool. Is Núñez worth a punt?
So I may be thinking that we need to see the evolution of the season, to be honest, with Darwin Núñez. I mean, they obviously trust him. He's 85 million quid. So Liverpool are trusting him. I'll be honest, and this plays into part of the way I play fantasy football. I've had not too much of a look until doing research for this pod as to what the players are doing this season. And I'm led to believe that Núñez isn't really showing the form in pre-season that we might hope for. So
it's still early days.
It is early
still
days.
3 weeks to go.
But he's 5 million quid, and if he is playing up front for Liverpool in 75% of the minutes, I mean, he is a bargain. So I'll definitely have him in some teams, and I'm really liking the draft that I did earlier today, which was a no Salah Liverpool team, which covers a huge amount of bases with Núñez, Trent, Robbo, Alisson. I've kind of got a bit of a placeholder on Harvey Elliott at the moment. If he gets minutes, he'd be amazing. I'm not too worried if it looks like he's not. I'll move him on to someone else. But you've got Jota, who's unlikely to be fit for the first match of the season, or it's a bit borderline, so you might want to watch out there. I think Núñez. So I think it's a yes. In the end, I've convinced myself that it's probably a yes on Núñez. He's decent player, and he's going to score goals.
Did you intend the pun when you said Darwin and then evolution?
Indeed.
Needs a bit.
I mean, he's not in my top draft. I'll put it that way. And I think he potentially offers really good value at £5 million. So it is tricky. As you just the exact correct word, tricky.
What about this for you then? 26 goals in 24 starts in the league last season,
Yeah.
and 6 goals in 6 starts in the Champions League last season as well.
Problem is, at the moment, I think he's trying a bit too hard. From watching him, if you can relax a bit and get gel into that side a bit more, I've no doubt he'll be a good player. But at the moment, he's not shown the form required. But it's only been 2 games.
2 games,
There's still 3 weeks to go. He might play in the Community Shield. We might, if he bangs a couple in that, everyone will be on him, won't they? But yeah, the jury's out at the moment, but there's still 3 weeks to go. So
yeah.
And if we talk about Bundesliga premiums, we talk about the tariff of players who do well in the Bundesliga coming to the Premier League and then not performing quite as well. The Portuguese Primeira Liga, I mean, it's one of those which he does look really good, and Community Shield is perfect if he plays that for us to see. Actually,
yeah.
Right.
After that game, that's when you start getting down to business and start making your proper drafts.
yeah.
So touching on from that, thoughts on Havertz at 4 million? He seems nailed, and he's currently in Ray's draft. What do you reckon?
So, I mean, the first thing is, I think you've just summed up the reason he probably will start week in, week out, which is they don't have anyone in that position. Raheem Sterling, I think, will dovetail quite nicely with a false 9 of Havertz, actually. So I think that could be really good. I don't know if Jorginho is still going to play or who's going to take penalties. Presumably it's not Havertz.
He's taken a few, hasn't he, in the past?
He has taken
a
few
few
in the past.
He has.
Shared it around a bit. I mean, they've still got Mason Mount, Christian Pulisic, Hakim Ziyech, Tino Werner, and now Raheem Sterling, who is in that front 3, even if he's not the lead. So there's rotation. He's a little bit too much of a gamble for me on that basis, but it's not far off. I did have him last year. To be fair, he was one of, I didn't mention him earlier in terms of key decisions and key months, but Havertz I had in my side.
He jump in?
I did jump in on Havertz, yeah. So I jumped in on Havertz and he was in there for, I think, only about 5 weeks in the end. And I tried him again right at the end of the season when Chelsea had some good fixtures. And he was one of my sort of potential differentials to actually, if he banged, I might have been, sat here with a check rather than not. But so I do have faith in Havertz, and I do think he's a good option. He's not quite convinced. If he's 4 million, and then you've got guaranteed centre forwards like Gabriel Jesus at 5, and you've got Raheem Sterling, who I think is only, he's at 5. I think he'll just feels instinctively like he's going to score more. He's going to be more exciting at Chelsea than Havertz, even though he's playing behind Havertz. I'm just not quite as convinced at that price with other options there that Havertz is the one.
It's a good price, though, isn't it? It's a bit of a headache for 4 million.
I mean, Dream Team, I seem to have learned that there's occasional criticism for some of their pricing structures and some things about them, but this season they really do seem to have got the vast majority of the prices at a really interesting place that's forcing a lot of decisions.
So with team selections being locked in, obviously when the season kicks off, obviously that's it, done. We used to be taking blind risks on enablers like Harvey Elliott, for example, whilst not knowing that they're a definite starter. What do you reckon, Matty?
So I think that's a great question. I think I'd be limiting that to maybe 1. So you're obviously putting in, let's say he's got a 50% chance of playing regularly through the season. You've got a 50% chance of using a transfer to get him out there for. So I wouldn't want to be putting in too many. But I mentioned a draft that I'm really liking the look of, which is a Liverpool draft that includes Harvey Elliott as an enabler. And I'm quite happy with that. And I don't know how many minutes he's going to play. But if he's my only real risk in that side, then I'm happy to have him. So I think don't do too many. But if you have one of those in your side, or even two, and one of them pays off and one of them doesn't get minutes, then you're probably on an all right start to the season. So don't go crazy. But if it's one player who we think has an even chance of getting quite a lot of minutes, then yes. I think also the change in the 5 substitutions rule and defenders is interesting, and defenders coming on attacking wing backs coming on when sides are winning and have a clean sheet, and getting the kind of partial clean sheet points could be interesting and a route to cheap points.
Yeah,
it's not one I'm planning on using massively, but
yeah, cheap points.
Good point. That
Yeah, well, at this moment, when we're looking at Harvey Elliott, last season he started the season in the first 11, and obviously he got injured. So he's looking like a really good enabler. And I would imagine, obviously, with another year under his belt, he's got more chance of starting. And also, we've got another 3 weeks of learnings to go. So we'll see the lineups for all the friendlies. And if he's starting most of the friendlies, you would think, especially with the Community Shield coming up, if he starts that, then you're thinking nailed starter for 2 million.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Klopp's been talking him up in pre-season. He absolutely loves him, and we need a bit more creativity in that midfield. There's no, you've got
Definitely.
the likes of Henderson and Milner's they're solid players, but you ask any Liverpool fan and they'll tell you what we need is a bit more creativity in there, and I think Elliott could be the man to provide that.
Paul, big thanks as well to Matt.
No, thank the three of you as well for I wouldn't have been where I was last season if it wasn't for you three. So really, thank you very much.
That's generous, mate. But
cheers, mate. Pleasure having you on the pod. Yeah, thanks, Matt, for joining us. If you'd like to join Matt and us on and show your support for the pod, you can join us at patron.com/Dream Team Tonic. Yeah, thanks. Great pod, guys. Thanks a lot. And we'll see you soon.
See you later.
Cheers, guys.